Welcome to another episode of The Art of Feminine Negotiation. I am your host, Cindy Watson, and I am really excited to introduce you to Sebina Noreen today. And we're going to be talking about negotiating with power. So welcome, Sabina. It is so great to have you here.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's a pleasure to be on board. I always love listening to your podcasts, and I feel incredible being here today as your guest.
Oh, well, thank you. You're so generous. And for those who don't know Sabina, Sabina is a consultant solicitor in the UK and also an online legal advisor in Dubai. She also holds a post of ambassador representing the UK for the World Women Organization, and she's a regular speaker at the World Litigation Forum. So as you can tell, Sabina is a total powerhouse. I can't wait to dig in and let her share some of her secret sauce for you. Sabina is also really solution oriented. One of the reasons I wanted her on this podcast is that she's highly skilled in negotiating and getting those negotiated settlements. And as a longtime attorney, she's a strong believer that court action may not always be the most appropriate action and may not be the most cost effective method to resolve a dispute. And I love that philosophy. She believes in remaining really flexible when negotiating. And we're going to hear all about that from Sabina directly. So, Sabina, as an attorney myself, I was really intrigued by your legal career. It sounds very sexy and dramatic. So, tell us a little bit about your experience, what you do.
Well, the reason why I chose to study law is because there's a tradition of attending law school in my immediate family, and I'm actually the second generation to follow the family tradition.
Nice.
So whilst I was growing up, I actually paid no interest in joining the legal profession because I had a creative streak, and that led me to work in the fashion and beauty industry for a few years. And after I finished college, I didn't go straight to university and get my degree. It was much later I made that decision to study as a mature student. And this was basically after I'd got married and after I'd given birth to my daughter, and I began to look for a new challenge at that point in my life. And I have to admit that going back into education after taking a long gap was very difficult for the first year.
Yeah.
But my tutors were highly supportive. And after I graduated with my Bachelor of Laws degree, I went on to attain my legal practice certificate, which is the LPC in the UK, and finally I qualified as a solicitor.
Yeah. Kudos to you. That does take guts. That's a lot of bravery and courage to be able to jump out and start that second career at that stage, especially post kids. But it makes sense to me, fashion, hence the very glamorous look. So I love that. And did you ever look back or regret the decision?
I didn't know. And to be fair, I want to be the role model for other women because I believe that I'm a great example to all women who are looking to start a career in law or who are considering going back to university to start a law degree after they've done something different in their lives or are converting existing degrees to law. And I want to be that example to say age is no barrier to entering the legal profession as a second career later in your life. But
Yeah.
my suggestion is it would be beneficial to get some hands-on experience, either as a paralegal or a legal executive before you make that decision on, so you know which area of law you'd like to practice in.
Yeah.
And I want to bring inspiration to the lives of women from all backgrounds, joining the legal profession by talking about my experiences, because I understand that success is not easy. And I appreciate that some women may feel there are barriers to their success, but I believe a change in mindset is what's needed sometimes. And mindset comes about after you meet someone with experiences similar to your own. And sometimes you're following patterns of behavior that were helpful to you in the past, but those patterns may now be preventing you from moving towards your achieved level or your achieved goal in life. And so my advice is that it's never too late to choose a different career path, whether you want to go to law school or not. It could be something completely different, but you must be willing to make the sacrifices in order to gain that success. You must be determined to reach your goals. And if you're committed, you will excel in any chosen career that you go for. So don't let anyone discourage you. And if you're passionate about your career, or if you're passionate about a career move, then you will have to remain proactive and you will succeed. And you should always take opportunities that come your way, despite the challenges that you will face.
Such a powerful message, Sabina. And I'm so glad you raised that and dug in a little deeper on it, because I think for women in particular, so often in life we do what's expected and we hit a certain stage and look back and realize we haven't followed our purpose or passion, and we believe it's too late to do that. So that is such a powerful message, that age is no barrier. And when you hit that point, when you decide, you recognize that there's something you're passionate about, go for it. I think that's such a powerful message. And let's talk about the elephant in the room. I'd love if you could share your experience as a woman sort of negotiating and in the legal career in a predominantly male world, by the sounds of your practice.
The challenges I faced of being a woman and then being a woman of ethnic minority was a challenge in itself.
I bet.
So I have to admit that studying law whilst raising my young daughter was extremely difficult and demanding, and then balancing motherhood with a career change was a challenge in itself for me. Then later, when I began to work in a private law firm, I realized that it was an extremely tough and pressurized profession. I had no choice but to put the long unsociable hours in, and I couldn't choose my clients or the type of work that I was interested to work on. And I felt that being a woman, again, of ethnic minority background, I really had to prove my value to my boss. And because the firm was led by male energy, I really felt I had to prove my worth to the older generation of male clients, as well as the
Hmm.
partners and the bosses that I worked with. I realized that the 9 to 5 approach wasn't going to work due to the volume of work, and there was lack of flexibility in those days. And going back to 2009 or so, and the flexible working culture that we have today in law firms wasn't there at the time. And
Yes,
to be honest, the culture has been triggered more so because of the COVID situation.
that's true.
And the thing, at the same time, I was ready to put in my hours, I was ready to do the hard work, and I did feel though my family life suffered as a result. And at the beginning of my career, I learned that I must remain flexible with my time to meet the flexible demands. And then eventually, as a working mother, I felt that the misconception that they had, the partners had, that a young woman in the legal profession with a family is not serious about her career, was something I had to prove to
Hmm.
them, and I had to prove them wrong. So to be fair, I had lots of family support, and I struggled at first to strike a good work-life balance, but I faced my challenges and I successfully overcame them with the support of my family. And as a woman, you should remain positive and confident and never doubt your ability to progress and reach the top, because as a woman, you will also always face issues with childcare challenges, and this can be something that starts from home before you even reach
Yeah,
the work
that's true.
scenario. Yeah, before you
So
get
true.
into the bullring, before you open the doors at work, it could even be a challenge with your partner, because with talented women, they're expected to take the lead role at home
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well as
Yes,
at
we
work.
have to be super women, right? We have to be power moms, power career women, powerful within the community. It's, they say we can have it all, but boy, there's sometimes feels like there's a high cost to that.
And it's difficult when you have little support from your partner.
Yeah.
And despite an increase in the number of female lawyers coming into the legal industry, and you've got to remember that within the UK, women came into law in 2019. It was 100 years since they'd been in law.
Wow.
So to be fair, it's not really been that
Yeah,
long.
that's true. In our human
Uh,
experience, that's very true.
so, despite the increase of the number of female lawyers coming into the legal industry, women in the law globally continue to face gender bias in the workplace,
Yes.
which will disproportionately affect their career advancement and success.
Yeah.
And law firms globally need to fully embrace a culture of equality and diversity of opportunity through education, workshops, and by changing internal policies so that women, and in some instances, men can be in a similar situation. So I'm
Mhm.
not going to discriminate against men either. All women and men should be treated fairly,
Yeah.
provided with equal opportunities, and that law firms should support to assist employee development. And so equality and diversity in the workplace are essential components to reduce prejudice and discrimination at all stages.
I love that. Such an important message now. And I do think we're feeling a shift, but we've still got a ways to go. So and I do find, since we're talking about that gender issue, women tend to be more, and obviously these are generalizations, but I certainly find I do a lot of work coaching women in, the art of negotiation. And I find women tend to be more likely to shy away from negotiation generally for a host of reasons that I totally understand, many tied to deep generational social conditioning, frankly, and even more so shying away and advocating for themselves. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice for women in that category, but both for female attorneys, but also just for the general population, for women who tend to shy away from advocating for themselves? What advice do you have for them, Sabina?
Women are likely to have the fear of failure. And at times they may think about giving up, and they need to push themselves past the boundaries of fear, because hard work and determination will eventually pay off. And when you work hard for something, and if you're in that scenario where you want to call it your passion, then my rule in life is turn your passion into your power.
I love
And
it.
when it's your time, you will shine. So, what's negotiation? It's when two or more people gather to reach an agreement, and every person at that table should feel happy or at least accept the end result. And one of my favorite quotes is by John Kennedy, who said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate."
I love
And
that too.
one of my very favorite quotes. And
Same.
my approach is to remain flexible when negotiating, and flexibility is the new and not the old or. And this creates freedom, which can often result in a win-win situation for all the parties involved. So as a woman, you do need to look into the history of the person you're negotiating with. What are their past behaviors like? And you should go in fully prepared. Have that negotiation with yourself before you walk into the room. So ask yourself, what solution are they hoping to achieve? Why do they want to settle? What's the value for them?
Yeah.
Bring out their needs in your own self to begin with. Bring out your fears, challenge your own fears, and deal with the emotional intelligence side of things. So once you understand your emotions, your triggers, your reactions, the way you communicate, the tone of your voice, your body language, because sometimes when you're asking for something more than you think you should have, your pitch can change.
Yeah.
Or your whole body language can change. And you deeply need to understand the things that cause you discomfort. So the role playing with yourself can be a very strong way to overcome these issues. And then at the same time, you need to understand the other side's emotions better. What message is it that they have behind their emotions, and what is it that what's the message that they're basically sending to you? Now, you may have a male on the other side, and they might, and I've had this experience myself, where the male counterpart might think, well, she's just an Asian lady and she looks quite young, she might be inexperienced. And so they try their techniques to try to undermine you.
Sure.
But so long as you've got your strategies in place, and so long as that you understand and you're open to suggestions, then you can put your frustrations to a side, because a relationship and a transaction-based approach are two very different things. And male ego sometimes shows up where they want to walk away with a win situation, not a win-win. So it's a case where they have a point to prove, and sometimes it just ends up being a game, because they're not looking at the picture in a clear way as to what's the best approach to settle. Is this the right time now? Is this cost effective? So all that goes out to the window, and all they can see is, I have to win this, and I'm going to basically deny any opportunity that's given to settle. And so in that scenario, it can be difficult, very difficult, to bring them back into line, and then ask your client at the same time to agree with what the other side is saying. I've had those challenges, which are quite difficult.
Yeah. And I want to come back and dig a little deeper on something. You packed so much beautiful gems in there. And one of the things when you talked about flexibility is the new and versus the traditional old or. Can you go a little deeper on that, what you mean by that, for some of our listeners who may be scratching their head?
Yeah, of course. The and is you saying that we are on the table together to walk away with something. So if the client, the old style was, it's either this or it's either that. You have basically got these two options, and that's it. And in my sort of humble opinion would be, well, this is your bottom line, this is my bottom line, but then in the middle we can meet, and what's your suggestion on that? So you're basically you're going in a type of mediation, and there could be a situation where the heat and the emotion in the room gets turned up. But at that point, the best solution might be to walk away for a short while and possibly collaborate when feelings and emotions have calmed down. And in the olden days, maybe that would have been a fire point where you say, okay, and or it's or nothing, and you've said no, and so that's the deal's broken and we walked away. But under the and situation, you can still come back into the room at a later stage and leave the doors open. So don't go in with the mindset where if either side decide to walk out of the room, the deal's done. It isn't. It shouldn't be. And you should have that open dialogue, and you're working in the best interest of your client and for the other side. It's not just for your client.
Yeah. And I think that applies even certainly outside the legal profession as well. I love that you've addressed this idea about that and versus or, because it's the difference between approaching negotiations with a scarcity mindset, right? We've got this fixed pie that we have to fight over versus coming with this abundance mindset that, hey, you come thinking you want this, I'm coming thinking I want that. But if we both come with an open, flexible and approach, we can come up with solutions that are better than what either of us thought coming into the room. So I think that's such beautiful advice. And you've really hit, I think, at the heart of the reason why I sort of started the Art of Feminine Negotiation and created that programming, because this idea about coming with that traditional competitive, this is a win or a lose proposition. I think it's beautiful the way that you framed it. And what's been your experience around that, Sabina, when you come not from a win-lose perspective, but a, hey, let's collaborate. Let me truly understand what it is that you need. What difference has that made in your negotiations?
That makes a huge difference. And I notice that more so when I'm negotiating in the Middle East. So as you can imagine, there's also a cultural issue as well as anything else. So simple things like if you walk into a room and you shake hands with a woman in some parts of the Middle East can be massively frowned upon and is not acceptable. The culture we have in the West is that we go out for drinks. So maybe, we start off with a negotiation, then maybe break away evening, have drinks, then come back the next day and have some more negotiation, try to build a rapport. Things are not done that way. In some parts of the Middle East, drinking can actually be another arrestable offence. So you've got to understand the local laws of where you are and appreciate that in some parts of the country. So in the West, if you don't shake hands, it's considered highly rude. But in some parts of the world, it's completely the opposite. So with a male-centric scenario, when I've walked into a room and there's been the male ego and the male energy that's more so positive in the room, I just basically go with neutral. So I know in the Middle East, if I'm negotiating there, it's more sort of black or navy blue, hair tied back, minimum makeup, because you want to walk in the room where they first take you seriously, because if you walk in and the image you project to them is one where they have just basically switched off right from that second, then the negotiation is not going to happen. So you set the scene, walk in, and your plan A might not be something that works out for you. So if you walk in with your team and you have a plan B, so the plan B would be a male might need to step in at some point. And I've had to do this at certain elements. So you've got to have that body language ready to say, okay, you take over now. That's one thing. It can be quite undermining as a woman, but sometimes when you're in a cultural setup and you've got your negotiation pre-planned and prepared, then you can have the dialogue between yourselves and in your team and get that out. But in any event, you've got to make the other side feel comfortable so that they want to come back to the table to do more deals and that you build trust along the way. And once you've mastered that skill, it becomes a game changer. And the move and negotiate, and you can move your negotiation to a more positive direction and get your message across in a more effective way. And another powerful skill I've learned along the way is listening. Because you're listening to what they are saying, but you're also listening to what they're not saying.
Absolutely.
So be open to asking questions, and you might want to ask them open-ended questions just to be clear as to what they've said and what the meaning behind that is, because you don't want to listen to what you've heard and then put a meaning to it that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. And that can have a strong effect on any negotiation, particularly with the macho idea that they have to be this strong person. Because I realized along the way, you don't have to be strong. You can be delicate, but also have strength.
I love that.
And I deal with my negotiation in that way. So breaking that myth of being a macho leader breaking the myth of being a winner or a loser is all something we need to put away now and come with the and mindset, not the or mindset, because the end goal should be to reach an agreement and a deal. And if you are walking in just to win and you're not walking in to reach that agreement, then, you know, are you really being transparent? Are you really being honest? Are you really being authentic? So use your empathy.
And my gosh, I want to unpack again so many beautiful layers there, and particularly the importance of that empathy and listening. And I must say, in North America in particular, we are not great at listening. I mean, it is a skill we haven't developed. People believe they're great listeners, but they're actually waiting for their turn to talk and make their counter arguments, which is very different than actually listening with a view to understanding both what's said and, as you say, because the stated needs are the tip of the iceberg. It's those unstated needs, that deeper why, that really is what moves a negotiation. I think such a powerful point, Sabina. And also, we don't often talk about cultural differences, but I'm so glad you raised that. So many, you know, even where in certain cultures where making direct eye contact, we tend to make a lot of direct eye contact in North America, and in many cultures that's seen as very offensive or challenging. So really being sensitive to those cultural sensitivities is so important. And just wanted to really unpack for our listeners as well, because Sabina's giving so much value here. In the last question, when she had answered as well about this idea about role playing, practice your ask, especially, as Sabina said, if it's an ask that you're feeling a little tension about, that you're maybe not 100% comfortable at. Practice that ask over and over so that when it comes out, it's not tentative. It doesn't sound like you're uncertain. You come with that ask absolutely confidently. And I love this idea about, I think you said you can be strong and delicate. So beautiful. And again, wanted to really put a pin in that for our listeners, because we all have masculine and feminine energy. It's not necessarily even gender based. We all have that masculine and feminine. And for so long, I think we've seen the feminine as a liability when we buy into that competitive, more masculine model. And have you found that to be a really powerful approach when you actually lean into some of those feminine skill sets like empathy and rapport building and flexibility? What has been your experience around that, Sabina?
My experience more so is that women are more emotional, more empathetic, and the calm approach sometimes is what's needed in the room. Something that wasn't really there maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago when negotiations were done. So the feminine approach, as you could call it, it might be the new male-centered approach. We don't know how things are going to work out. You know, women are considered the more emotional parties at the moment, but the men might take over with the right training. And so remaining calm and in control. So you can be assertive, but in a very respectful way. So don't react without thinking. And don't be desperate, because desperation will always show up in your tone, and it isn't attractive, especially if you're in a room full of men. It really isn't. So prepare, plan A, plan B, so that you have no surprises. Always prepare before you walk in, and remain focused, particularly mentally. And if you hit a part where a scenario where you need to walk away, well, then be open to walking away. If you have come to a conclusion that the other side are basically just on a fishing expedition, they have no compromise, or they do not want to settle, then you might just want to walk away. If you feel that they are just trying to understand how you're preparing your case and they're just trying to find answers and they're attempting to throw you off guard, just slow down and then possibly address that issue in a professional manner. Ask them, where are you going with this? What do you hope to achieve from this? Have you spoken to anyone else? And if it's not your best alternative, and your best alternative to a negotiation solution, which is your partner, you should determine your bottom line before you walk into that negotiation room, because having the best alternative to a negotiation agreement will always allow you to know when you should walk away. So having that female energy can be a powerful skill. And with my sort of tip for the audience would be that your experiences, when you're learning from that experience and learning from experience of others, will lead you to manage your situation better and better each time you do a negotiation.
Yeah.
So that's my take on
Love
that.
it.
I'll pass it
Yeah.
back to you, Cindy.
No, some great gems in there. I love that. And this whole idea about attachment, I think people often don't consider that enough. Never be so attached to any particular deal or idea in a deal that you're not prepared to walk away. Because so often I've seen people bargain long past the point when it makes sense for them because they've become so attached to the idea. And I've also seen people walk away from great deals that are lying right there on the table because became so attached to just their vision of what the deal should look like that they actually missed opportunities that would have worked out better for them. So beautiful point. And also you touched on that pacing, so important, Sabina. And again, I want to really put a pin in that for our listeners out there. When you're, particularly if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't feel like you have to jump and meet the pace of the other person. Take the time, take that breath if you need to, control the pacing, slow down. And I don't know that you use the word curiosity, but I love, because I think your answer implicitly talked about ask those questions, ask those deeper questions, get curious is a great source of power in a negotiation. All great tips. And I'd love, what would be your sort of hot tip on how we can best negotiate with bullies or people who have more power? What tips would you have for us on that?
My tip would be always know what your value is and what value you bring to the table. And don't ever mix your feelings in with this. So focus on the intent of the negotiation and not the monetary value, which is the ROI
Yeah.
output. And
Yeah.
with that, you will reach a settlement that will be a win-win situation for both sides, because you want both sides to walk away having felt they've achieved something rather than lost out on
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, beautiful. And I know you've mentioned emotion already a couple of times and the importance of having that EQ, that emotional intelligence, and also this idea that women are seen as being more emotional in negotiations. What role do you think emotion plays in negotiation? I know some people feel it has no role. Some people feel that it's important to bring the emotion, but don't be emotional, but bring the emotion of your sort of deeper why. What are your thoughts on the role of emotion in negotiations?
Emotion is more of a mindset. So the mindset you're walking in with, you're basically opening a door to walk into the negotiation room. And before you open that door, you've got to say, I've got my ego. What is my ego? My ego is
Mm,
I. I am is the biggest ego-centric word in
yeah.
the vocabulary. I am, you leave that at the door, because the main question that the other side are going to ask is, who are you? What can you do for me? And why should I care? So if you leave your ego out the door and you walk in with the mindset just to negotiate, to settle a deal, so your want is in your conscious mind, your desire is in your subconscious mind, and you've got to be sure that your want and your desire don't mix in any way. You keep them separate, keep your ego aside, walk in, keep the emotions at bay. So once you're in the room, then again, when you're walking in, first impressions always last. So walk in, depending on where you are, it could be the case where you walk in, it makes you feel better to walk in a suit. Sometimes ladies like to put lots of makeup on, sometimes they want to look plain, sometimes high heels do the trick for someone. It gives you that boost to say, I can do this and I can settle, and I'm basically heading in the right direction in a positive manner. So your image can also have an impact on the long-term emotional side in yourself. And then once the negotiation starts and the room possibly can get heated at some points,
Mhm.
then again, the emotional side of things, the calming side of things would be to say, I think this is a good time to have a break. Let's get together after half an hour. And if you can really see that the emotions have come to some point where parties are shouting and voices are highly raised, then maybe you could just break away for the day and say we can rejoin tomorrow once everyone's calmer, feeling more refreshed, or a week or a month, and walk away with the intention of bringing parties back together at a later stage.
Yeah.
So emotional intelligence and audience intelligence is highly important, and both need to be addressed. And the skill of mastering, the mindset of knowing when and the triggers and how and the what are very important.
Yeah, I love that. And negotiating your own mindset is part of your prep process, right? I mean, negotiate your own mindset in advance of going into negotiation. I think that's great. And I think it's so important when you talked about ego and that I am. Park that at the door, because when you come from that competitive win-lose mentality, we believe it has to all be about me and my needs and what I want. And we end up having that inattentional blindness where we don't see all of the other cues and signals that are lying there on the table for us. I think that's so important. And what you're saying so beautifully lines up. One of my models is, I call it the no fear model. And you've talked about that fear of failure already. You've talked about ego, which is that fear, ego, attachment, and reactivity, all of which you've touched on so beautifully, Sabina. Now, what do you see in your experience as the key reasons? What would you say are the reasons that most negotiations fail?
I'd say lack of understanding, lack of building a rapport, building a relationship. So I said earlier, relationship and transactional negotiations are very different. If I want to build long-term relations with you, and I want to do more podcasts with you, and I want to have a long-term business set up with you, and I have an issue, we have a problem strikes between us, I'm going to deal with that in a different way than I would if you was just a client that came to me as a one-off under a contract or a retainer. And so that's what we fail to recognize. You could have a business deal that goes very wrong, but that business deal might consist of two partners, and the two partners might be husband and wife or cohabitees. And so not only is a business deal there going to explode, so is the personal relationship. And so when a relationship and a transactional deal are on the table, you've got to deal with them both very, very separately.
I think that's such important advice as well, right? Because I think we often forget, when people think of the outcome of a negotiation, they almost always are only thinking about the matter, right? The substance, the what. But, I always think it's so important, and I love that you've touched on this. Whenever you're considering the outcomes you're looking for, consider the outcome of the substance, but also the relationship outcome. It's two. And again, whether that's personal or professional, whether you're negotiating with your kid, your intimate partner, or multi-million-dollar deals, consider both of those aspects. What are the relationship outcomes you want? So important. And I know you've already touched on a number of them, just weaving them in so beautifully with our discussion so far, Sabina. But what would you say are the key skills or hallmarks that make a great negotiator?
Negotiation is tough, but we all do it. We all do it on a daily basis, whether that be personally, professionally, socially. And the more you think about any situation as a negotiation, then the better you will be committed.
That's good.
So I would say always listen. Listen to what the other side is saying. Listen to what your mind is telling you. Look at the environment you're in. So sometimes a negotiation can't be done in a particular setup. You might need to walk into a neutral place to have that negotiation. So if I was in some dispute with yourself and you wanted me to come to your house for negotiation, or I wanted you to come to my house, the problem is, which I would feel more powerful if you were walking through my door, or you would feel more powerful if I was walking through your door. So we should possibly then look at a neutral third party venue where both parties are going in feeling just as relaxed or just as uncomfortable as the other. So that would be another thing I would suggest during a negotiation. And always think about the end goal, and think about moving the parties towards the end goal, and show a genuine interest in the other side, and be real. Build that trust and be real.
And I think it's great that you talked about the fact that, everything's a negotiation. So part of it, the more you think about that intentionally, the better you're going to get as you practice. And just distilling that, I think recognizing that all of life is a negotiation, and showing up with intention to those negotiations and preparing for them, recognizing them as negotiations, will get you better outcomes. I think that was beautiful advice. And my gosh, I can't believe how fast our time has gone here. I just feel like you've hit on so many gorgeous gems for us. And I normally like to end by asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? And it doesn't have to be professionally. It doesn't even have to be about negotiation or the practice of law. What are one of those shifts in life that you had that were kind of an aha changing moment for you, Sabina?
I would say a change in my paradigm. So your paradigm is when you're born with your paradigm wide open. So your genetic history from parents, grandparents, going back. And then you have everything that you're learning. When they say a child's mind's open until the age of 5 or so, and they're absorbing everything like a sponge. It's because your paradigm is open
Yeah.
and you're being programmed. And the biggest challenge for me was reprogramming my paradigm as an adult and letting go of everything I'd learned as a child, and then having this mind shift to become my own person.
Mm.
That was a big aha moment for me, only because I then grew as a person for myself. I discovered myself and I wasn't molded by anyone. I am who I am because of my changes I've made in myself.
Ah, that is such a powerful mindset shift. My gosh. And for everybody out there, again, just to go a layer deeper on that, because, and it's beautiful we end there because it kind of comes back full circle to what we started talking about, this idea about the conditioning, that deep, sometimes multi-generational conditioning that can hold us back from being the most powerful version of ourselves. Not only the best negotiator, but frankly, our ideas about our sense of worth, our sense of value, so much of that is based on these paradigms that have been conditioned into us. So I love that idea, Sabina, about recognizing you can be a clean slate again and create your own paradigm, create who you want to be. I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful message. So thank you so much for the incredible wisdom that you've shared with us today, Sabina. It's been so great to have you here.
Thank you, Cindy.
And for all of our listeners out there, make sure to go check out Sabina as well. Learn more about Sabina. You can check out her website at ajamessolicitors.com. Check her out on Insta at commercial.disputes.uk. Check her out on LinkedIn as Sebina Noreen Malik, or on Twitter under the same name as well, or Facebook at Sabina Legal. So, and we'll make sure to include those in the show notes as well so that you can check out Sabina and follow the fantastic work that she is doing out there in the world. And I am sure you all got just loads of value from this episode. I actually invite you to go back and re-listen to it again, because there were so many layered nuggets in there that you'll be able to unpack at your leisure. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please make sure to do so and share it with anyone else that you think could get some benefit from this message, which I happen to be biased, but I believe is everybody, because all of life is a negotiation, as Sabina and I have talked about today. So the more you raise your awareness about that and bring intention, the better you're going to be able to negotiate a better life for yourself. And make sure to join our Women on Purpose community as well. If you're not already a member, on Facebook under groups, go to Women on Purpose Community Group. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve in life. Until the next time, take care.